Hey there, welcome to the Flute 360 podcast. I'm Dr. Heidi K. Begay, and I'm a flutist, educator, coach, and podcaster. My God-given mission is to serve you. I am passionate about guiding you, the modern-day flutist, to discover your unique voice on and off the stage. The goal of this podcast is to help you thrive, both as an artist and as a musicpreneur. Go ahead and grab some espresso, your favorite notepad, and let's get to it. Today's episode 204 is titled Debunking Myths of Musicians' Health and Wellness with Austin Pancner. Hey Flute 360er, are you a flutist who experiences tension, tightness, or occasional pain while you play? Well, research suggests that anywhere from 62 to 93% of musicians will fit into this category during their playing career. Or maybe you are a flutist that doesn't want to join this looming statistic and would rather play with less tension and more freedom. Either way, Austin Pancner, the founder and CEO of The Functional Musician, is running an 8-week online injury prevention course that begins on June 5th. Over 8 weeks, Austin will guide you through his injury prevention model to help you release tension, tightness, and pain. In addition, you will participate in daily movement routines, injury prevention lessons, and workshops, and develop a toolbox of techniques to manage and prevent distracting physical symptoms so you can live with less tension and more freedom on and away from your instrument. Enrollment is open until June 1st. Please go to thefunctionalmusician.com to sign up. The link is in the show notes below. Thanks! Hey everyone, welcome back to another Flute 360 podcast episode. I am here with not only a colleague and somebody whom I really respect in the industry, but he's a friend. And that makes it so much more exciting because I get to sit back, relax in some sort of way, and pick his brain and learn from him. And I think that's like the highlight of my job as a podcast host is to collaborate with friends, collaborate with people whom I really get to respect. And not only that, we get to hit record and share this information with you, where I don't get to just be selfish and be like, all right, Austin, let me pick your brain and just, but I get to share it with you. And this is why we do the podcast. And I'm so passionate about this series because Austin has a heart of gold. He is so knowledgeable in this area and he wants to serve you. We know that statistically 62, 63 to 93% of musicians right now are going through pain due to their instrument. And I'm sorry, and I'm probably okay to put words in your mouth, Austin, here, but that's not okay, right? It's not okay. And so we're trying to change that. Well, Austin's trying to change that. I'm just giving him a platform to get the word out, with the knowledge that he has acquired over the years. But this series is inspired by you, the listener, because I have received, and Austin has seen it for his, with his own eyes. We have seen DMs, text messages, emails, and even before I invited Austin to come to do this series with me, I was receiving countless emails from 360 listeners all across the globe talking about pain in their neck and wrists and shoulders. And so all of that's to say, Austin, I'm so appreciative of you. I'm so appreciative of the fact that you have such a heart of servitude where you want to truly help people overcome their pain or prevent their pain. So welcome to the third part. And we're going to talk about myths today.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction again, Heidi. It's a pleasure to be here. And as you said, you're my friend too. And I think what's something that's special about all the conversations that we have is that we're both really relaxed. There's no pressure. We're just here talking to each other in a relaxed manner, just sitting back and, talking about things we're passionate about. And, I think you hit the nail on the head with that statistic in your audience and, the musicians who are experiencing pain. And hopefully this conversation, today, the previous episodes that we have, at least this series, these 4 episodes can provide some hope, some inspiration, and some guidance for those who maybe don't know where to look or maybe don't know where to start, because it can be quite a confusing journey to navigate on your own. And there's so much conflicting information out there. It's like, it can be, it's already an overwhelming, stressful journey to begin with, and you add in all of those other factors, it's like, oh my goodness, like what do I even do? And if you're like me, I can easily become an overthinker and become overwhelmed, and it can be an easy rabbit hole to fall down. But anyway, that's all to say, I'm super excited to be here and excited to see where this myths conversation takes us today.
Yeah, no, you couldn't have said it any better. And it is a confusing time when you are going through pain, especially, and we've highlighted this in episode 202 and 203, especially when it comes to your art. And I know musicians are so passionate about sharing their musical voice through their instrument. And when you can't do that, and you can't be successful in delivering how you want to, put yourself out there and experience the beauty from our art without pain, or when musicians are going through, right, trying to deliver their art and they're delivering it through pain, that is so frustrating. It's so frustrating. And, the thing that we've highlighted in episodes 202 and 203 is you don't have to do it alone. You can find the resources. And what Austin said beautifully was find the right resources, because there are technology and, resources out there and everything. It could be this double-edged sword. It's great that we live in this era of, information, but if it's not the right information, then you're not going to move the needle forward in the right direction. And, that's painful too.
Yeah. And speaking of pain, I mean, that kind of transitions into, a myth I hear all the time, if I may, is that we have to suffer for our art. There's that term, no pain, no gain. And, I would argue that holds us back more than it helps us. And, I was told actually by an early teacher, who's like, oh yeah, if your embouchure starts to swell, it means you've been practicing enough. And that necessarily wasn't the case. I actually ended up developing a pretty severe embouchure injury in graduate school because I was practicing 6 to 8 hours a day on trombone. And, I look back and I laugh at myself and I was like, why didn't I have the courage to just listen to my body and myself? And it's because it was like, oh, it should hurt. We do need to suffer for our art. But what if it was the other way around? What if it was, we can actually take care of our body and our mind and be in a place of fulfillment, of happiness, of balance, of centeredness and groundedness when we approach our instrument and our playing? We can still put emotion behind our music. But the cool thing about it is then we can have that boundary so that emotion doesn't take over our physical body or manifest through physical tension, tightness, or pain, or whatever physical symptom that is attracted to your body in that moment type of thing. And that way we can separate ourselves and put those emotional performances out there, but we can still feel good about it.
And you brought up a really interesting point. Maybe you are not the statistic. Maybe you do not fall into the 62 to 93% tile of people experiencing pain related to their instrument. Yay, good. Prevention is important from what we've learned in E202 and 203. But then you as the educator, what you just said, like your trombone teacher said, oh, if your embouchure hurts, that's a good thing. So we have a responsibility as educators in our studios to provide the right information to our students.
100%.
So I think then even if you're not in that group, that statistic that we listed off, maybe even taking a class in order to get the right information to make sure your studio is healthy, I think is a really good, responsible initiative for, you as the teacher overseeing your students and their well-being. Right?
Yeah. And this also begs the question too. It's like encouraging students to take accountability for their education. Not everything our teacher said is going to work for our particular situation. We're all different. We all have different learning styles. We all have different personalities. Pedagogically, we're pretty divided amongst playing styles and playing approaches, but we're all trying to go for the same thing. So I think, kind of recognizing something that I wish I would have learned earlier is that, and actually something that was stressed to me from an earlier teacher, was experiment and try all of these different things and keep what sticks. Don't be afraid to abandon things that no longer serve you. And that's something I forgot about and had to learn the hard way. That was a hard lesson that I learned. But, our guts often lead us down a path that can be really helpful for us. Our body and our mind, our subconscious tell us things, and, we can choose to listen and use that as information to make decisions, or we can choose to ignore it and do maybe what doesn't serve us, or do the complete opposite. And maybe there are situations where you want to do both. And that's the beauty of life. I can't give you, there's no right answer here, but there's subjectivity there that I think is really interesting, both from an educator and a student.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, those signals from your body will be there. Your body, from what I've experienced, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I resonated so much with what you just said. In the times and the seasons when I have been in pain, not even related to my instrument, other symptoms coming up with other conditions, my body was telling me, hey, something's not right. And by tuning in and listening to that, it's amazing. It blows my mind. I could go down the deepest rabbit hole ever with this, but I will try to restrain myself. But long story short, what I've learned about the body and what I've seen how my body adapts, of seasons of distress and something is not right, it will tell you. And if you feed it the right stuff, food, nutritious food, exercise, sleep, water, if you give it and if you equip it with the right essential elements, oh my goodness, your body could thrive. And it always, it always just blows my mind, because I'm like, our bodies are so beautifully designed to take care of ourselves.
Yeah. Oh man, I love that. It's like that actually put a smile on my face. Our bodies are beautifully designed. And whenever I think this is why I do what I do, actually, is because the body's just amazing. And, whether I'm coaching, one-on-one, or I'm doing a group session, it's like, when people make these discoveries for themselves, oh man, it gives me goosebumps every time. And this brings me to another myth where it's like, we can always, I hear this a lot over Instagram, is like, oh, I want help developing body awareness. Why can't I feel that my left shoulder's raising? For example, or, why can't I feel that I'm doing something weird when I'm playing in the high range? Or why am I not, can't feel that I'm doing something weird when I'm holding my flute with my wrist? And, just to give people a little clarity and a little context, number one, the body is always adapting. I talk about this, I think in 201 and 202, but especially 202 or 203, the second episode of this series. But there's something called sensory motor amnesia, where as we incorporate movements into the body, they start to become involuntary and they start to become automated. And eventually we start losing sensations to a certain movement or a certain posture. So we actually can lose the ability to recognize physical sensations in different areas of the body as movements become automated. So, for example, let's put it in like a college education setting where I'll use a flutist as an example. But this is very related to any brass instrument as well, where maybe there's a flutist who, when they're playing something highly technical or demanding, both of their shoulders rise. And then you tell them, hey, did you know both of your shoulders rising when you were playing this difficult passage? Sometimes they'll be like, yeah, I know it's a thing. I'm working on it. Or they'll be like, no, I had no idea. And that is one of those examples of a lack of body awareness, just simply because they haven't been mindfully moving those areas and it's become automated in that process. Now, this opens up a huge can of worms. It's like, okay, are these movements helpful for someone? Are they supporting, daily free living and performing? And is it helpful for their movements? Is it helpful for their playing? There is going to be some general shoulder rising when we inhale and general shoulder descension when we exhale, but too much of that, and we're not, or if it's too much of that and we're not aware, that could start incorporating some tension in different places of your body, because it's all interconnected. A lot of people with neck pain also, have some thoracic upper back problems going on, not problems, but alignment things going on. And people who struggle with, lower back, anterior pelvic tilts often have neck problems and shoulder problems as well. So again, it's all interconnected. And I think something that I would encourage everybody to do, along with everything that you said beautifully, the body is beautiful and we can set up the environment in a way that supports a high level of function and living and movement and all of that fun stuff, is developing a daily movement routine. And I'm getting ahead of myself because this is what I was going to talk about later in our next session. So stay tuned for the next episode for that. But that's one of the reasons why daily movement is so important. So important. But anyway, I digress. I got ahead of myself.
No.
I tend to do that sometimes. But I think it was just worth mentioning because it's not something we really think about.
No, for sure. I totally agree. And I think that segues beautifully into another myth that you orchestrated so beautifully in this list. Is sitting bad for you? Because you're talking about movement, lack of movement. So is sitting bad for you? And I would think that sitting...
what a great question.
I think sitting too much probably could lead to issues, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So, and when I said, I wasn't like, oh, sitting's bad for you. That was like, me agreeing with you. For those listeners out there, I tend to use the word a lot. So is sitting bad? This is such a great question that often gets misinterpreted because there's a lot of literature that's very conflicting out there. But what I want people to think about is that the body's always adapting to its environment, whether we're sitting, walking, standing, jumping, lounging, whatever type of movement that we're doing. And when we're stuck in one position for, roughly, there's some studies that say after 20 or 30 movements of 20 to 30 minutes of being in a movement, your body starts to adapt. Some studies say around 45, some say around an hour. So let's just say for a general argument's sake that we're talking 30 minutes to 60 minutes, your body will start to adapt to whatever position that it's in.
Okay.
Anything after that, the longer you stay in that position, our body is going to start to adapt to that position. So for example, if I was sitting down for, let's say 3 hours, and I got up, I start feeling some tension in my hip flexors, which is going to be on the front side, all the way above your knee, near your quad, near your hips, and maybe some lower back tension. That is a way that my body has adapted to that way of sitting. For example, if you wake up in the morning and you feel, we were just sleeping, ideally, 6 to 9 hours, depending on your sleep quality and quantity and who you are as a person, all of that fun stuff and other factors, your body's going to be adapting to how you sleep. If you've ever been in a car for 4 hours and got out of the car, like your body might ache a little bit, So it's like sitting isn't necessarily bad, but it's something that causes adaptation. And what can be detrimental is if our body gets stuck in a certain position. So for example, if you're sitting down, let's say I just kind of collapse everything and I'm sitting kind of slouched. This actually isn't bad as long as I have the ability to go in and out of it. But if I get stuck in this compressed, rounded shoulder, forward neck position and I can't get out of it, that's when problems are going to start to arise. Same thing with extension, where, a lot of brass players and wind players in an effort to help breathing mechanics, because their posture has adapted to a certain way of gravity, they'll extend their lower back and their middle back. And if they're in rehearsal and they're in this position, as long as they can get in and out of it, they can stay in that position for a little bit. But if they get stuck in it, that's going to be very fatiguing. It's going to cause a lot of tension because you're basically putting your lower back, middle back, and upper back in an end range of motion. And that's going to be very exhausting for a lot of people. So is sitting necessarily bad for you? No, I don't think it's the new smoking. But if we're not careful, our body can adapt in different ways that is going to lower range of motion, alter our movement, present different tension and tightness. And what we talked about, I'm pretty sure we talked about this in 203, is that the position of the spine and the position of the rib cage and your posture affects how you breathe. And depending on how you approach your instrument, what type of breathing concept you do with that, either way, it's going to affect your breathing mechanics, which could incorporate heightened levels of tension when you go to play your instrument. And as you get tired in that certain posture, your breathing mechanics are also going to alter and change with that. So it's not necessarily, again, in summary, I don't think it's necessarily bad, but there are some things to consider in that situation. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%. I love the fact that you debunked that myth, because I have heard that myth before. And you're right. Like you see these memes or you see like different things pop up in social media and misinformation, right? And here, to kind of take a step back with you, just so people know where I'm coming from. And they're not like, oh my gosh, where is Heidi going with this? I'm connecting the dots of other conversations that I've had with other professionals like yourself, and I'm bringing it full circle in my noggin. So I remember in episode 170 with Dr. Amy Likar, She's a body mapping expert. And I remember her specifically saying she has her timer at her desk going off at 45 minutes. And that's because of what you just said. It's okay that I'm sitting at my desk. It's okay that I'm typing on the keyboard and doing Zoom calls. But she sets that timer off because she needs to tell her body to get up and move, do a 5-minute exercise, walk around the block, because she doesn't want to stay. And she's afraid of being like, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I'm paraphrasing the conversation. She doesn't want to be in that fixed state where something could trickle, where her hips or whatever experience pain. She wants to make sure that there is movement. It's okay to sit, but that timer reminds her, get up, move. So that way she's not fixated.
Yeah, I love that. I love that so much. And to put it into context, I went to my cousin's wedding last weekend, and I live in upstate New York with my fiance, and I'm from Indiana. So plane tickets were, oh my God. I could have bought like 3 new trombone bells for that trip. So we were like, let's rent a car and drive. And I drove 24 hours. Well, we split it, but I basically drove, we were in the car for 24 hours over the course of 3 days. No, actually, because we had to drive to the wedding venue and back, 26 hours, 26 hours in the car over 3 days. So when I got back, I tested, my range of motion assessments that I do with all my clients. And oh boy, did my body adapt. I lost ranges of motion. I lost relative motion, which means, if I move my shoulder's going to work with my scapula and my rib cage and my spine and my hips all together. That didn't happen. Various areas of my body were stuck. I was feeling tightness. I wasn't necessarily feeling pain, but I was feeling achy, tender, and super, super stiff. And all of my ranges of motion were completely reduced. And it took me a couple of days to get all of that back. But it's just a great reminder of even one travel session. If you imagine if I decided to drive to an audition or drive to a festival, those same adaptations would still apply. And then when I go to play my instrument, I wouldn't have been able to play forte or play with a beautiful, effortless sound with how I'm used to, with clear, consistent articulation in all registers and all that fun stuff. It would have been very tense, very tight, and I would have had a hard time getting things going because my body was no longer supporting me because it was in this very tight, tense, adaptive state, just as an example.
Ooh, our entire conversations last week and this week are all my favorite. But I think right there, that was like my absolute favorite. Only because you brought it to our musicians' world. We have to travel to festivals. We have to travel to present or give a concert, a recital, a masterclass. It's inevitable. Train, plane, let's see how many more words I can rhyme with, car, and so we forget like that's part of the gig. But when we put our horn or our flute to our face, how is that going to transfer over to what you just said beautifully? Like, how am I going to be able to express myself freely when my body is all like bunched up, constricted, tender, and all of those adjectives that you just listed off? That's a really good connection.
Yeah. And it's something that we just have to deal with as musicians, whether we're touring, with our ensemble or whether we're going to an audition or, whether we have an intense gig with maybe a regional orchestra where we're traveling a couple hours, we're going to rehearsal and traveling a couple hours back. That's a huge load on the body too, where you're essentially sitting for, 6-ish hours in that one example. But, this is why it's really important to have some type of movement practice, again, getting ahead of myself, but having a movement practice that helps, restore your body's movement and function if you happen to push it too far. Because some of the things are just part of what it means to be a musician in the 21st century. And it's not something that's necessarily taught in school, or at least it wasn't for me. So I think that this is something we need to consider as we start to develop a framework or develop our own injury prevention practice or recovery practice for that matter. Because if you're also going through a recovery, that's also going to be a huge factor in how you recover, especially if your body is adapting in those ways that necessarily isn't supporting optimal function for your movement in your body.
So that's amazing. I just had a thought. Then would you recommend if like I know in the summer, I have a concert tour coming up. I'm going to do a little tour. I'm going Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Alabama. So what I'm hearing is maybe to be proactive with that tour, if you know that the car ride is going to take 10 hours, maybe schedule in the tour an extra day in between traveling and playing. So that way you can give yourself some time for rest, movement, and getting back to like this center before you have to go on stage. Would you schedule that into the tour?
Well, it totally depends. If I can, like, I would say yes and no. It's such a hard question. It's totally situational, but it depends how much time I have before that concert date. For example, let's say I got in at like 1 p.m. the day before a concert. That would probably be enough time to get in the zone. But if I got in like 9, 10 p.m. the night before, and then I had a rehearsal the next morning, that's pushing it a little bit. And I would have to really prioritize movement at night and movement in the morning for 15 to 20 minutes. And maybe even some movement before the concert, just because of how much that travel can adapt or can put negative influences and adaptations on the body in that sense. But you know what I would do 100% is get in the habit of moving my body through those traveling sessions, moving when I get to the hotels, and just staying on top of my daily movement and recovery routine and decompression on a daily basis. So by the end of that touring session, my body and my mind isn't completely burnt out and destroyed, which is a common thing. I hear so many ensembles of various instruments. They'll start a tour in a month or two when their bodies are aching, they're hurting. And I've even heard a couple of cases where they had to cancel their tour just because, some of the musicians were injured, and you can't really, it's not advisable to push through a very intense tour if you're experiencing a great amount of pain that's affecting your ability to play your instrument. That's only going to accumulate and feed into that cycle a little more. But if you had a daily routine, if you had a injury prevention model that helped you with this, that helped alleviate all of these adaptations of travel and rehearsals and intense performances and stressful mental factors as well, that could support you through that process so you can better show up for yourself in any given context, so to speak.
I love that. Yeah. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I was just thinking, if we can be proactive about it, like maybe that's something that we can schedule in advance to give ourselves, the most opportunities, to feeling really good.
Yeah. And, that brings us to a really good myth is like we have, like a lot of people think injury prevention is about pain management. It's about, just preventing injury. But that's not necessarily the case, because at that point it becomes reactive. And it really becomes about recovery. But pain management is a part of injury prevention. But injury prevention should, also make you feel really good about yourself. It should help in, it would influence your performance. It would influence your life. It would positively impact your sleep, your energy, your mood, your mindset. And, we often think about injury prevention as just preventing injury, but I think it's so much more. And, there's also this mindset of don't fix what's not broken. But it's like, the body keeps score, whether we're 12 or whether we're, 85. And I think the more we can get ahead of that, the more proactive you can use, to use that awesome word that you threw in there. I think we can better live the lives that we envision, and be better musicians.
Yeah. Ooh, I love it. I'm learning so much. So because you brought up age, man, we're just like kings and queens today of segues. I'm loving it.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, bring it on.
So through social media and, hearing comments, especially like on your amazing posts, conversations get going, right? And I see, not just your posts, but other conversations in the world of social media. Some people say, hey, when you get older, your body's going to hurt as you age. So that's a myth, right?
Yeah, I would say so. I think that's something, that there are a lot of reasons people say that. But the older we get, our body doesn't adapt as well as it did when we were in our teens or our early 20s. I mean, I could absolutely remember times where I could work out for 2 or 3 hours. Not that I would do that now, but if I did the same thing now as I did in my early 20s or my early teens, my body would not feel great. Same thing with the food I eat. I used to be able to drink a 6-pack of beer, eat 24 cookies in a single setting, and then wake up the next day and run like a 5K. What? What in the world? Now I drink 2 beers, I look at a cookie and I'm like, ooh, I don't feel good.
You look at a cookie.
Yeah. Although I'll eat that cookie too.
Yeah, right?
Hashtag Girl Scout Thin Mints are life. But anyway, so, that is a common myth. And our body is actually built to last 100 years.
Wow.
It's built to last 100 years. Some physical
Really?
therapists say 115 years. So it's like our bodies are built to last. Our organs are built to last. And it's really a matter of how we treat them through our life. And I mean, lifestyles were different now than they were 100 years ago or 200 years ago or even 2,000 years ago. And the further you go back, the more active lifestyles we would have to lead with various jobs or career paths that we've chosen, such as being at a lumber mill, being a blacksmith, working on a boat, doing any type of manual labor type of thing, which challenges our bodies to adapt in a very positive way. Granted that we don't absolutely destroy our body in the process, but something that I'd want to encourage everybody is like age is just a number. And although, yes, the older we get, the more time that we're going to have to allow ourselves for our bodies to adapt. For example, if I was working with someone who is 20, who is experiencing pain, and someone who is 65, who is experiencing pain, those are two completely different situations, and the progression, the load, the exercises, and how I approach each client is going to be different. But the concepts are still the same. Put their body in an adaptive state, get their body to a stronger state, help them with their posture and alignment and their breathing, and things will improve. So, I'll put this in example. I worked with someone who was in her mid-50s, who experienced a lot of tension, tightness, and some pain in her upper back and lower back. And after working with her for 12 weeks, she was able to manage that and prevent a lot of that pain from happening. Now, granted, the older we get, we have a lot of other different factors that come into play, for females, such as menopause. For males, we have a midlife crisis, maybe, a lot of other, things like that come up into play that can be factors. But I think the most important thing is, the older we get, we often find ourselves making excuses and giving ourselves very busy schedules and not really focusing too much on our health, because we think as we get older, oh, pain's just going to happen. So what happens when pain happens? We just kind of let it be and ignore it. And then once we ignore it, we build that neural pathway of, once I experience the physical symptom, I can push through. It's fine. But over time, this has super detrimental impacts because, with overuse injuries especially, these are all cumulative effects. So over time, it gets to the point where you may have 4 or 5 different things happening at once and you don't really know what's going on. And then you go to the doctor and all of a sudden you're diagnosed with 3 or 4 different things that maybe occurred from ignoring the physical symptoms that were presented 10, 15, 20 years earlier.
Wow. I learned so much in those nuggets. The thing that I learned for the first time, it makes sense, but I did not know that our bodies are meant to live 100, 115 years.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it goes
isn't
back.
It remarkable? It's crazy.
That was a mind-blowing moment for me. I was like, what? That is so cool. And it goes back to that nugget that we said at the top of the hour about how our bodies are beautifully designed. So like you just said, you said something about the intestines, like it's built to last. It's built to serve you. It's built to do its function. That's amazing. So if we equip it with the right, I'm using stuff, and that's a horrible general thing, but if you equip the body, then what I'm hearing is if you equip it with the essentials, then your body can thrive and it can last a really long time.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And it's learning how to put your body in that state. And it's learning how to, prevent and manage pain, increase your movement capacity, and just put yourself in a state where you feel really good, where it feels good to move, where you can go outside, you can do yard work for a couple of hours, and you're not on the couch for the next 2 days because you overdid it and threw out your lower back. Or if you happen to overdo it, you know what you can do to get back on track. Because it's so much more than just playing our instrument, right? It's how we live. It's being able to do the things that we want to do. But unfortunately, being a musician, as we talked about in 203, it's just there's so many factors that are sometimes out of our control that can contribute to this.
Yeah. I think that's why I love watching Amy Porter. And I hope she doesn't mind me mentioning this, but she's a flute professor at the University of Michigan, and she has a podcast too. And she's very active on social media, and she takes pictures of herself running, doing cardio, weightlifting. And I've heard her
Love it.
in numerous posts, like the headline will say something like, I'm 50, I forget her age. Let's just say 55. I'm 55, but I don't have to feel like I'm 55.
Amen.
And that was a huge aha moment for me. I love my mom to death. I don't think she listens to my podcast episodes, but she's 67, and throughout her life, and even recently as she's getting into her 60s and late 60s into her 70s, she's like, oh, well, it's part of aging. That's just a part of life. And I get it. I totally get it. And I empathize with that. But when I see Amy Porter's posts about like, hey, I'm 55 and I don't have to feel like I'm 55. And then I hear an elderly woman, 10, 15 years older than her, saying, oh, that's just a fact of life. I think it makes me a little like annoyed when I hear that, because it's like, but you can do something about it. And there's no judgment.
Yeah.
I have fallen into this camp too of like, woe is me. I get it. I totally get it. I don't want people to think like, oh my gosh, Heidi is so insensitive. But when you are fed with these nuggets of like, hey, I'm feeling at the tip top of my life when it comes to health in my 50s, better than I ever have before. And you see these like influential, powerful people. And then when you hear little nuggets like that, you're like, oh, but really? Do you have to like feel that way? And you're right. Age is just a number. And I felt that like when I was in my 30s and I had a daily exercise routine, I was eating much better than I was in my 20s. I would tell like even my husband, my Eric, I would say, oh my goodness, like I feel better than when I was a teenager or when I was in my 20s. And it's empowering. It's so empowering. You're just like, oh my gosh, like you think that's why we're going through, these myths, but you think it would be the opposite, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that so much. And, I love the word empowering. And I think what you're getting at too, it's like, question for you, how did that impact the areas outside of your life, outside of that exercise routine?
I slept better, less anxiety, less depression, just kind of like because of that empowerment and feeling more confident, finding myself going after things that probably scared me before.
I love it.
Yeah. Okay. I mean,
you're hitting the nail on the head.
It's almost like a whole like paradigm shift. Cause I don't know, like for me, it's like when I felt stronger and more, you're not totally in control of everything because life is life. But when I kind of took more control of that, it was like, oh, I can do hard things. Oh, what else have I been avoiding that I could attempt or try or challenge myself to do XYZ? And so it kind of trickles into other areas of your life.
So what you're saying is not only what I hear you saying is not only does it have a holistic impact on your emotional or on your physical well-being, but it sounds like pain is much more than just the physical.
Oh, literally, like for me, when I was in pain, it was spiritually painful to go through that injury, and it was emotionally painful to go through it.
Yeah, 100%. And often, I don't know what you experienced with your injury, but I was told it was all in my head a couple of times. I was like, what? It's all in my head? And like, really what they meant to say was like, literally what I think they were getting at is like, not emotionally, it was all in your head, but like neurologically, my brain was picking up on pain. But did I take it that way? Heck no, I didn't take it that way. I was like, how dare you? You don't like, what? Who are you to tell me that it's all in my head? I hurt. Give me those pain meds, doctor.
Yeah.
Come on. But I think going back to you, I think, the holistic impact, taking care of your health, especially from an injury prevention standpoint and recovery standpoint, it's a self journey of growth that empowers you and empowers every single area of your life. Every area of your life.
Yep.
And that is a really beautiful thing. And something I've seen in every client that I have worked with is that once they get past their pain, they start doing activities they love again. They start getting out of their comfort zone. They start growing as a person. They start becoming a better learner. I mean, it's absolutely insane how how taking those or giving someone the reins to their own life has on their life, if that made sense. I think I butchered that, but it's amazing how giving someone the power and the reins in the driver's seat to their own life can flip the switch in their mind and help them take control, so to speak.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's all connected. And
all connected. It's all connected.
Yeah.
It's all connected.
And you're speaking my language because hence the 360ness.
Yes. Oh, I love it too. And it's like I approach this holistically as well. I mean, you can't talk about physical without talking about the emotional. You can't talk about posture without talking about alignment. I mean, everything is interconnected. And, going back to that original myth, it's so much more than just pain management, And although pain management has its role, and there are some good choices and some choices that may not support your longevity, I think, it's got to be part of the picture. But anyway, I digress. No matter what age you are, you can choose to show up for yourself. And that's really what this is all about, is showing up for yourself. And that's going to look different for everybody. And we often think we have to go all in, but that's not necessarily the case. 10 to 15 minutes a day of mindful movement in the morning and the evening is enough to change your life. And until that statement is challenged and I choose to put it on the side and evolve it, that is what I am sticking by. 10 to 15 movements a day will change your life.
Now, see, you just debunked a myth in my brain, and I need to have that and what you just said on repeat in my earbuds probably 10 times a day. Because as you know, as my friend, we've unlocked or unpacked this in many, many masterminds, which, by the way, I miss you so much when it comes to masterminds. I miss you too.
I miss those masterminds. Those were so fun.
Oh my goodness. We lead very busy lives, but man, I always look forward to hearing your wins and Cynthia's wins and the pain points. Anyways, I don't want to digress, but just saying mastermind out loud, I was like, oh, I miss Austin, seeing him once a month for those meetings. But anyways, that needs to be on repeat for me, because something that we've unpacked a lot through my channel of growing my business or whatever thing I was focusing on, you've heard me say this time and time again. I am such an all or nothing gal. It's like, if it can't be 110% hours at a time focusing on this thing or focusing on fitness or whatever, then I'm not going to do it at all. And I hear how crazy that is, to some degree. And I don't know if crazy is the right word. It's not sustainable. It's not practical. Right. And so you reminding me hey, 10 or 15 minutes a day of exercise, of movement can really transform your life and how you feel. That I know this. I know this because I've heard you say it before in these masterminds, but it really blows my mind. I know I sound like I'm being very dramatic right now, and I think the reason why it blows my mind is because in my brain, it's like, oh, if it's not 50, 60, 70, 80 minutes, don't do it all. Yeah. But to hear 10 minutes, it takes me longer to cook pasta in 10 minutes.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Especially if you have a stove that's a piece of crap.
Sounds like you're talking from experience.
Yeah. Can relate. Yes. I'm talking about my stove. It takes me about 25 minutes.
Whoa. Well, good thing you're moving.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, totally. And that, that brings us to probably our most important myth is that, it has to be all or nothing. And, I had an old roommate back, I'm not going to share because if they're listening, they'll totally know who they are. But basically he or she, when they worked out, they'd work out twice a week. And in order to make up for lost time, they would work out for an hour and a half to 2 hours. And then they would be sore for the next 3 or 4 days. After they weren't sore, they work out because they didn't work out for 3 or 4 days. Boom, 60 or 90 minutes to 2 hours. I had another really good friend who was a religious strength training person, would strength train in the gym, hour and a half, 6 days a week, 1 day of rest, because that's what their coaching program told them to do.
Wow.
And they didn't move outside the gym. The only time they moved was inside the gym. And I actually fell into this trap a couple of times and, had a lot of superficial tension creep into my body because of that. But, we don't have to go do extreme cardio for 45 minutes a day. We don't have to go weightlift for 45 minutes a day. We don't have to go do a yoga session for an hour a day every day. Now, granted, those are beneficial practices done in moderation. Strength training for 45 minutes would be my recommendation, just from the National Academy of Sports Medicine perspective, because any more than that, you're going to start to burn energy, and the benefits to risk ratio start to really fluctuate without proper nutrition and supplemental energy during that time and hydration, all that. Anyway, I'm getting down a rabbit hole. But basically what I'm saying is, like, we often think we have to go all or nothing. And I fell into this trap so much. And I often do with trombone and have to remind myself and, hold in the palm of my hand and tell myself, a 15-minute focused session of lip slurs is more beneficial than going ham for 60 to 90 minutes on trombone. Like, you can get so much done with that amount of time. And there are times where like those travel days, like when I'm getting gas, I'll do 15 squats, or I'll just sit in a squat and really lightly breathe while kind of supporting myself up with a car handle. That is enough movement to get me through the next couple of hours without feeling super stiff, tight, or tender, or in pain. At the end of a long concert day, because I've built this skill with all of these different techniques, I can spend 10, 15 minutes decompressing, and any tension that I did experience, because wearing a suit is so uncomfortable for my upper back, I got to get a new one, I've outgrown it, that I will have tension up there and I have to relieve it. And I can do that in 10 or 15 minutes now. And as soon as we switch this mindset of all or nothing to, what can I do to make my body feel great right now? Boom, superpower. Boom, mindset shift. Boom, like I'm sitting at the computer. It's like, I feel a little tension in my neck. I recognize I'm hunching over. I'm just going to switch positions. I'm going to take a breath. Tension gone.
I love that. And when you said you were, filling up your car with gas, in those 10 minutes or in those 5 minutes, I can do a squat and breathe in the squat. It brings it back to, boiling water and cooking that spaghetti on the stovetop. In those 10 to 15 minutes, what can you do proactively, to move while your spaghetti is cooking?
Yeah, exactly. And then, that's what I'll do in the morning. I'll go and I have a little boiler of water. I'll make a French press coffee every morning, because it's kind of my thing. It's a special little thing that I like to do in the morning that helps me. And it takes about 8 minutes for the water to boil. So I click that boil button. I'll go do mobility. If I forgot to clean the French press, I'll clean that first, and then I'll do mobility. And that's, 6 to 8 movements first thing in the morning. And of course, mindful breathing during that, because you can't move and you can't talk about movement, alignment, posture without talking about breathing. And after those 6 to 8 minutes, my mind's awake. My body's feeling great. And I'm like, all right, got my coffee. Like, let's do this. 6 to 8 minutes. That's all it takes.
I'm going to write that on my whiteboard, and I'm going to, because I like to focus on one thing for the week, in the sense of like a friendly reminder or a loving reminder. And I think for me, that's the loving reminder that I need going into this week as I'm thinking about the new week. Totally. But I love it. I love going through these myths and debunking it. Can we switch it up a bit and look at the dialogue that has been occurring between you, me, and some 360 listeners?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
Thank you for listening to the Flute 360 podcast, and we hope that the information has served you well. Friendly reminder, you want to go to thefunctionalmusician.com to register to Austin Pancner's 8-week injury prevention course. Now, there's no reason for you to do this alone. If you are in pain, or if you want more information on how to prevent pain from creeping into your career, then you need to go and register and grab your seat today. Enrollment is open until June 1st, and I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh my goodness, this is mid-May. I've got plenty of time. I've been there, but you are a busy bee, and you may forget, and we don't want that to happen. So head on over to Austin's website at thefunctionalmusician.com and register today. Your future self will thank you.
Let's talk about Flute.